Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Funky Marketing Podcast. This is the podcast where I host people who are good people, working for good people and doing good things, basically. Those people can be copywriters, marketeers, designers, developers, entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they are doing something different. And today is another one of those episodes related to the Funky Marketing Top Voices. I have with me a guest. She's one of the Funky Marketing Top Voices, Camille Trent. Welcome to the Funky Marketing Podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be on your list of top voices for one, but then also to be on this show this morning. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll to introduce you. I want to read your About Us section on LinkedIn because I find it really nice, and so I'm gonna read it from word to word. So I'm a pretty even split of Phoebe and Monica, creative type who gets a little too competitive of the racquetball court. As a copywriter and marketeer, my job is to make it easier for your ideal customer to find you, trust you, and buy from you. That's it. That's my whole pitch. And if you're into fancy bullets, I've got those as well. So copywriter and brand strategist with experience working in-house, freelance, and at an agency, specialties, website copywriting, social media content. Chill unless watching my Portland Trail Blazers blow another lead, then all bets are off. Dame Lillard for president. I love it, and it's kind of sums up really well, like different points of who you really are and what you do, right?
Yeah. So, well, I could talk to that a little bit because I just wrote a piece about LinkedIn and how to optimize your LinkedIn profile. And that was aimed at freelancers, really. Like it was a guide for freelancers. And I feel like I had kind of gone down that road before, right? Like at one point, if you read my bio, it was probably 3 or 4 times as long. And it was, just basically like my life story of like at each job. And then I realized people, it's not that they don't care, but they don't care yet. They don't know you well enough to want to know your full story. And so it's better just to kind of have the bullet points. And then on top of that, I think that I've sort of come around to the idea of, well, one, applying copywriting to, every kind of parts of your life, every part of your writing at least. And that kind of includes like, how do you tell the story in as few words possible, but also have personality in there, So I think if people think, okay, as few words possible, then that removes the personality, right? Because that's removing the fluff. It's just like the bare bones of things, right? But I'm talking about how do you communicate concisely, but still show personality and not tell personality, if that makes sense. Like how can I communicate sort of who I am, so you get a sense of what it would be like to work with me without like spelling it out. And so that's kind of what I try to do in my about page, but then also my copywriting in general of how can I in a more clever, not even clever, but a more creative way, communicate those things without ever saying them. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do there is like, if you've watched Friends or, or if you have any idea of these characters, which I like Friends, but it's not like, I actually like The Office and some other shows more, but it's more that's like a piece of pop culture that most people know at this point. And so it's an easy way to like relate who I am by making those comparisons. And that's kind of, I guess, a go-to move for me anyways, is just analogies, right? That's like a popular style, I guess, that I use a lot, is drawing those comparisons. Which I won't get into too much, but that's just an example of playing to your personality strengths as a copywriter. It's not like one right way to do it.
Yeah, you summed it very well. Like that's why copywriting is hard. Not everybody can be a good copywriter. Just trying to say so many things with using few words. That's an art, and not many people can do it. Actually, a lot of people can write like long stories and like extend to everything, but can you narrow it down to just a few words and still keep the essence. That's something that not many people can do. And related to the friends, like, I'm sure my wife is the go-to person for the friends for everything. Like, she can binge that thing for days. I don't know. Like, I even know all the episodes just because she's binging them all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of how it goes. She lost the umbrella with Friends characters like after our wedding, and I think she still didn't get over that.
Yeah, it's like the cultural glue that kind of like holds us all together. Like no matter where you like live in the world, like you probably have heard of Friends, and so it's nice for that.
Yeah, so let's go back to the childhood, and it's kind of interesting. Like you said that you grow up in a forest with not many neighbors around, and 4 younger sisters, right?
Five.
Five. Sorry. Oh, that's a lot. And it's kind of interesting to me because I was like growing up in the city with huge mountains around, but I didn't ever have like a village. My grandfather, they didn't live in a village. So I guess when I was a little bit older, I started to organize huge summer camps just to find an excuse to go to the mountains, to go to the villages, and kind of spend even 2 months in summer over there. So how it was growing up over there?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so the town that I grew up in is about 10,000 people. It's pretty small. Was outside of Portland, so Portland, Oregon is also not like a huge city, you know, like it's a metropolitan area, but it's not like an LA or a New York or really not as big as like most metropolitan cities. So so I grew up about 45 minutes from there, and it's like on the way to the mountain. So city people or people like from Portland proper only knew about us because of this like awesome donut shop that's in our town. And so they're like, oh yeah, like Joe's Donuts, like we'd stop there, you know, on the way to go skiing and stuff. And so that's to give you a like perspective of where it was. And then it was a little bit more like rural too. A lot of the high school was an interesting split of like people who actually lived on the mountains, like that were kind of like ski bums. And then you also have kind of like this rural mix, people like in Sandy or right outside of Sandy, because like the logging community. And then it's just like suburban, you know, like suburban people too. So it's kind of an interesting mix of people because of the boundaries of the high school. They went all the way up to the mountain. So if you lived like within an hour, like you were in that high school. And so yeah, so that was interesting. But me specifically, like I lived 4 miles like outside of this like small town too. And so so we're like one of the last bus stops. The driveway that I lived on, or that me and like my neighbors lived on, was like this gravel driveway that was like half a mile long that we would walk like to and from like every day. And so there really is the like, you know, walking 2 miles in the snow like back and forth. It wasn't super cold there, so I don't have like a lot of those like crazy you know, no shoes, like walking, you know, 7 miles like there and back and stuff. Like we had a bus, and like my parents would pick us up if it was cold, but it was that kind of like environment, like where there's trees all over too, because it's Oregon, so it's very like private. And my nearest like neighbor probably lived like a fourth of a mile away. And so I had some friends, and like I could bike to people, but nobody, it wasn't like a suburban, it wasn't very suburban. So yeah, so that's kind of my childhood. Then I was the oldest of like of 5 sisters. And so I was kind of, I guess, leading the charge for some of our like creative adventures, which were like, you know, like we had a camcorder, and so it was like, you know, making music videos or making videos in general. Anytime like we would get clothes at the store, like we would put on like a fashion show, and we'd do that. We would like reenact like Mulan and stuff. Like we just, you know, like you make your own fun kind of, because it's up to your imagination when you kind of like live in the middle of nowhere, and when it's like takes a long time to get to anyone. And so we just didn't necessarily know the life where where you go to a neighbor's house, or you just like go to your next door neighbor's house. But we had a bunch of trees. We had like these clippers, like these shears, and so we would like cut down like bushes and like trees and stuff to like cut out forts. So we would make forts. We would climb trees, ride our bikes like down our like windy gravel roads and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. I don't definitely not bitter or anything about it. I think it was like a fun, like idealistic childhood. It wasn't until I was like a teenager that I was like, this sucks, like nobody's close, like I have to drive like 45 minutes to get to like my nearest friend at that point. But I think that it opened up like my imagination and sort of like creativity, especially I think being the oldest and like kind of in some ways feeling that responsibility to like create the fun.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought that this is one of the reasons that sparked your creativity. And like I'm just comparing how things are around here, because we have also a lot of villages. I mean, not here right now when I'm in Novi, but in my hometown, we have a lot of like mountain villages where like in winter they are just outside of the world. Nobody goes there, and it's kind of like it's not a it's a hard life. All depends now. You had buses, but they don't have it, and it's kind of a different situation. But I always kind of love that, like the forest and everything. Like even in the recent years, my father lived on a hill, surrounded by vineyards and oak trees, and it was like fantastic. I still have the house, and when I'm in my hometown, I go over there. Like even my mother asked me, "What the hell are you doing there for 2 weeks?" I said, "Like I'm enjoying living life. You know, it's kind of cool to just detach and go into nature."
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Like I mean, there is like I guess it can be like lonely, you know, like it can be kind of like isolating in some ways, but where I live specifically, like I look back on it and I'm like, oh, this was like idealistic for a lot of reasons, because we're like 45 minutes from the mountain. Like we could go skiing or go like tubing or whatever, like within 45 minutes. And then also the other direction, it was like 45 minutes from the river, which was wide enough to like to go boating, or there's like little islands between like Oregon and Washington, so you could actually go like camp out like on these islands. And so so it's really cool because you kind of have like the water and like the mountains nearby, and you have a city like within 45 minutes. And so so it's kind of the best of both worlds. Like looking back on it, I wouldn't mind living somewhere again like that. Although like now that I'm older, I do like living closer to the city. Like we live just like right outside of Denver, and I like that.
Sounds good. I'm trying to find where to buy a house a little bit outside of the city, but I can get to the city fast because I still love like concerts, music, all that spark. Because like where I live, the city has different cultures, different heritage, and you know it's kind of interesting and dynamic. And I like that feel, that bit of the city. I like it, but I still I like the nature as well. So trying to find like a middle. So after the childhood, what were your first touches with work? How did you start working? I that's the question I always ask, because I always get tons of different answers. Everybody has their own experience.
Yeah, the bridge kind of, right? And so I think about this sometimes, like what are the very first things, I guess, that got me interested in writing. And I think it was when I was in middle school, I got a guitar. And so I wanted to like learn this guitar. And even before that, I played the piano, but I was never super, in retrospect, I'm like kicking myself, but I was never like super interested in the piano because I was mainly learning classical music. And I'm much better by ear than by reading notes. And so so I think that was like a struggle with I had really good piano teachers, but just with the piano teaching style. And so Yeah. So anyway, so I was gravitating toward the guitar. I was trying to like learn that. And then I was also kind of like writing songs around that time, like end of middle school. And then going into high school, I started writing songs. And, you know, they're just like the typical middle school, high school stuff, crushes and whatnot. But in high school, it was actually more about actually not crushes, but also just like goofy stuff, you know, just like joke songs. And so that's why I say Phoebe, like in that comparison too, because it was like Phoebe-esque like type songs that we're talking about, like beatnik. And I had some really good English teachers, and one of my assignments for that was to write, you know, a report on like an American author. And so mine was Nathaniel Hawthorne. So one of the first songs that I wrote in high school was just like a parody song about Nathaniel Hawthorne. So very niche. And then I really enjoyed that. Like I performed that for the class. I like played guitar, and then either I proposed it or like, you know, or some of my friends brought it up, because they all had to do like their own American author reports. And so I ended up just writing songs and like performing for each of their reports as well. And to me, it was just kind of like a challenge or like an exercise to do it. You know, like I think if I have a prompt, then I do pretty well. I've been thinking about this for people, because I think there's two different like struggles with writing or copywriting, and one of them, especially like for something like LinkedIn, right? You're trying to write something every day, and it seems like some people have issues like coming up with the idea, but coming up with the idea is not usually my issue. Like my issue is usually narrowing it down, right? And so or just finding the thing that to focus on, or something that I'm passionate enough that I'll stick with. And so so I like social media for that reason, because it's not as big of a commitment, you know, like you got a short like character count, but I can pick a direction and I can sort of like flesh it out. But anyway, sorry, going back to this, high school writing songs, and then I go to college, and I talked to a counselor, and they're like, hey, you know, what do you like to do? And so I said, art, writing, business. Like those are like, I remember those are like the three like words that I gave them. And because I had done some art in high school, but I was also not very detail oriented with it. Like I didn't care about the details of the picture. I cared about like the concept, you know, behind it, and like the meaning behind it. And so I was doing some of that. I was writing these songs. I always enjoyed English. I was actually a little bit better at math. Like I always scored better in math, and I think looking back on it, it was partly because of structure. Like if I had enough like structure, then I could do well, but I was more of like a creative writer at that point. And then yeah, business, like I was just sort of like entrepreneurial, and that sort of came from just living out in the woods with a bunch of like sisters. So at one point we sort of like created our own like economy of like sorts on like the top of the stairs, like the upstairs, where like we had like fake dollars or whatever. Like we had like a bartering system like upstairs. And so things like that. But I was making caramels and stuff too. Like I was selling making things and selling things. And so I liked all of those things. And then the counselor was like, well, you should check out the advertising department, because that's sort of a mix of everything that you like, where it's creative, but it relates to business. And there's a copywriter's like track like within there. And so I didn't really know what that was, but I sounded interesting. I was like, oh yeah, like I was making like fake commercials like growing up and stuff too, you know. I was making like these mock commercials too. And so I kind of like immediately did that. Like I sort of knew like going into college that was what I was going to try and do. And so from there, like you had to apply to that program, to the advertising program, because it was somewhat competitive, and then got into that. And then from there you could apply to the creative track, which was also competitive. And so I ended up doing that as well. And within that, one of the tracks was like copywriting. And so I got like really specific, like really early on, and I wanted to work for a big a big agency. Like I again, I think I mentioned this, but I was watching like Mad Men at the time. It was like coming out. And so I was like, I want to be like the Peggy Olson. I want to work at like an Ogilvy like type, type shop. And that sort of meant like LA or New York or Denver, just like a bigger metropolitan area. So so I was doing pretty well in that program, and I got into, for my internship, I got into the Martin Agency, which is known for like the Geico commercials and like the Oreo jingles. So it was like perfect for for what I wanted to do. But I did that internship for a few months or however long it was, and then my husband, though, at the time, like I got married in college, and so he is studying infectious disease actually. And so before all this pandemic stuff, and so he was studying microbiology as an undergrad, and then he wanted to do a PhD program in infectious disease. And so they had a pretty good program out in Galveston, so in Houston area. So we ended up moving out there. You know, they're not known for their agencies necessarily. At least they don't have any like big ones. And so I got a job at the biggest agency. I was gonna like make the best of it. And I learned a ton there, but it wasn't like it wasn't exactly like what I was prepared for. Like I was prepared for doing like creative commercial type advertising, where it's a lot about just coming up with a big idea, a lot of like B2C. And then what I ended up doing was a lot of like B2B, and a lot of like working for enterprises. So a lot of tech companies. So for instance, I got to work from some big names. So like HP, Linksys, Belkin, like that sort of thing. But it was a lot different. Like what I was doing was a lot different. And so what was cool about it though was I got to learn like technical writing. Like as part of the job, you had to be a good editor. You had to be really good at technical writing, because you're doing like tech, but you're doing like kind of like the boring parts of tech sometimes too. And so so at one point, like I was advertising servers, you know, trying to figure out how like servers work. But yeah, it was a really good, it was a good exercise. I remember a few years into it thinking like, oh, these are skills that a lot of my like colleagues like wouldn't get to learn, and not that they necessarily want to, but it's nice to be forced to do it in some ways. And so my editing got a lot better. My like just grammar and technical writing got a lot better. I did that for almost 3 years. I was super burnt out on the commute. And then in some ways, like the lifestyle, and I don't think this is unique to my agency. I think a lot of agencies typically can work a lot of hours, and there's a lot of churn. Like there's a lot of people leaving all the time too. And so I had the opportunity to work with probably like some of the most talented people that I've worked with, definitely the most creative or the most talented creatives that I've ever worked with. So I really enjoyed that part of it. But I was also kind of ready to leave, and that I felt like I had learned a good amount of information. I wanted to learn like marketing. I didn't think about it in these terms, but I think that in retrospect, I wanted to learn marketing. So the shop was more of a production shop. Like we're creating assets and we were working with usually like product managers, like at big corporations. Or we were working with like marketing directors, right? So basically we would give them like the assets, and they would decide what to do with them, or that maybe they had already had a plan going into it, and that's why they needed the assets to kind of fill that plan. But kind of what I realized is that a lot of people didn't have a plan, or at least like not the best plan, and I didn't think about it that way at the time, but it was just afterwards that I was like, oh, it's frustrating that I don't like get to really see like what happens to it after we give them the assets, but I also don't have any like control of it. You know, like I can't control like whether it's successful. I don't know like what the distribution strategy is. I don't even know what a distribution strategy is. And so I worked for like a small like a fishing pier slash seafood restaurant in Galveston. So Galveston is like a little island like off of Houston. And so so I just took a job there because that's where my husband was working. We were both sick of commutes, and so it was a way for us both to have like a 5-minute commute. Yeah, so kind of have the lifestyle that I wanted, but also it was helpful in learning marketing in general. So there I put together like a few WordPress sites, and did some like meta descriptions and learned a little bit of like SEO, mainly just like learned local marketing, and that included social media and learning some distribution basically. And some of it was like boots on the ground, like passing out coupons and things at like nearby restaurants, like manning like booths like at events, like setting up events so that we had a booth, and then like talking to college students and things like that too, because this is like a pretty like fancy restaurant on the water, but you would have like the off season and the tourist like season. So like the tourism season, like we're booming, everything's good, and then it's just like completely dead after that. And so it's like, how do we stay in business like during that time? And so it's, you know, like a matter of if you can tap into that market of what they called like winter Texans that like owned homes and would come down there during the winter sometimes, or like the students that were always there. And so I was like, the students are always here, like let's try to tap into that market, because they like drinks on the water as well. Like they don't have that like much money, but they'll go for the experience. Like I'm in college, like you want an experience. And so anyways, I'm going too deep into that, but I did that only for a few months actually. And then a guy called back up that I had interviewed with before, and he was working for like an oil and gas like securities like type company when I had interviewed, and then he decided to leave there, went to like a regional bank, and was like, hey, I still need like the same position, so if you're still interested, you can join here. And so this was mainly a personality thing. At this point, I had realized that it was most important who you work with, who you work for, than what you're doing necessarily. And so I liked his vibe, and so I from the first interview actually, so I kind of gave it a chance, even though I just started this other thing. And so when interviewed, liked what they were trying to do, liked that they were trying to that they had started their business to appeal to small and medium business owners. Like they had a very clear like vision of what their bank was, and unlike a lot of business owners who are just like, I want to start a business and I'm good at this thing, and so I'll just do this. And a lot of banks like start on the retail side, but they were like, no, like there's a gap in the market where the big corporations are taken care of and like the small guys are taken care of with credit unions, but it's kind of like the in between that we can service. And so so I liked the mission. I joined there, and I was there for a few years, and I started as like a writer, and then just got to, because there wasn't much of a marketing department, it was, you know, my boss that was the marketing director / IT director, and he was really good. Like he actually had a lot of background in SEO, like when it was at its height, you know, like when it was a little bit easier to do. He had good background in like e-commerce SEO, and he had a good strategy, but he also had a few different things to juggle, and so I got to kind of like take over like where I wanted to, and he gave me like a lot of flexibility to do that. So I learned a lot of good things there, had to like man the social as well. And I think because of that, learned some things about social that have helped me a lot, and kind of learned like what I wanted to do. So that kind of brings us to present. I work I work for MarketerHire now. I'm as a managing editor. But essentially all of those experiences helped me learn that that I like content marketing, for one. Like I didn't even necessarily know that term like a few years ago, but just that I wanted to write, but I wanted to be involved in like the whole marketing process, like not just the creation part of it, but the distribution part of it, and just have like a little bit more control like over whether or not something is successful for better or worse, right? Like you get like the full blame, but also like the full like rewards, like when it works out. And so so doing those things, I started in copywriting. I wanted to go more broad, and then I kind of like wanted to go back and be a little bit more specific, and content marketing was a good way to marry those things.
Yeah, it's good when I don't need to ask questions, when you just unlock it. I heard a few important things over there that I want to emphasize. So first one is, it's good when the educational system gives you the chance to narrow it down to something, even though maybe at that time you don't know how narrow you want to go, but it's good that you can have a chance to do that. Like in my case, I couldn't do that. I mean, I was studying marketing, but I ended up as a dropout because I didn't learn anything about marketing over there. Like it was one exam called like marketing. Other stuff were just like how to set up the prices, how many corns they have in specific parties in the US, like those kind of things that you needed just to learn. But okay, it gave me, let's say, a foundation that I can use now when I'm like start having my own business, like how to do I don't know, the operations, how to handle the team, those kind of things. So kind of like the big stuff, but still nothing when it comes to the copyright. That thing didn't exist back then in Serbia. But anyway, so then starting to work with bigger companies, when you are just one piece in the whole marketing and advertising process. And usually, that thing that I heard from you is kind of what I'm hearing from a lot of like youngsters, young talented copywriters, when they read Ogilvy and they come to the agency and they expect, like, I'm just gonna write. I'm not, because in bigger agency, you have somebody who is doing the research, you have somebody who is doing some other stuff, you're just writing. But then they end up going to the smaller agency when you actually need to do the research as well. You need to do some other stuff, and then you learn, so that's those things, or you don't learn ever. That's also happened. And then, like your story, you went big with some big names, then you went narrow and kind of like ended up working for a small restaurant and really trying all different things over there. Like I like to call that being in the dirt and trying some things that works. And usually being in the dirt, you actually see the bigger picture. You can see when things are moving, at least for yourself. And basically that's what got you into where you are now. So you handle not just the creation part of the content, but also the distribution, and just kind of handle the process. But it also reminds me of a thing that a lot of marketing agencies, the mistake a lot of marketing agencies are making, and it is they just implement somebody else's strategies, vision, processes. Anyway, they just handle one specific part of the process. So, and they actually, in most cases, accept the blame if they don't get to the results. And it's kind of like you can't actually accept those things if the whole process doesn't depend on you. And this is some of the mistakes that I'm seeing when it comes to marketing. So talking about that, what's kind of like a bad marketing for you? What are some examples that you are seeing around? I know that there's a lot of it around us.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually a big fan of like what Chris Walker's doing. So like their Refined Labs, and I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing. And I think it's kind of similar, right? Like where you guys are both, well, tell me if I'm wrong, but where you guys are both doing some demand generation, and you're doing sort of like full cycle marketing, like in some ways, right? Like where you're kind of like taking it end to end, like from like the strategy to like consulting with the clients, figuring out what they actually need, and then like making that happen, right? And so I think when you're in a place where you're forced to learn those things, like to learn how it all fits together, then that's like when you develop like a lot of confidence and where you can succeed, because instead of knowing like this one thing, this one niche thing, which that can work as well. Like there's plenty of production shops or people that are, you know, just good at video, and that can work as well. Like I think there's something to be said for a very like niche agency, but I think that is the not weakness, but the risk, if you go that route, is if you don't ever like learn marketing like as a whole, then if you do need to market yourself, like, or if those services like become like less in demand, and where at one point it was just you're getting a bunch of clients because it's popular, like video for instance, but then everyone starts doing it, you know, and you don't necessarily know how to market yourself, that's kind of when you get into trouble. And so I think just listening to Chris Walker's podcast, listening to people like you or other people on LinkedIn, seeing kind of how they process things, really just seeing that people can process things and how they think through the whole life cycle. I think a good example that you had the other day was like your distribution strategy. Like it was kind of like your like spider web of of the process. So I think thinking that way, like thinking strategically in how it all fits together and how we're going to get from point A to point B and what those steps are in between, drawing it out. Like I think that those are the people that don't have to worry as much because like they have like planned it out and they have done it before. So I think what's working right now is people that understand both to some degree, like not necessarily like 100% proficient, but are able to know what they need. And so so performance marketing, and then like brand marketing, and then content creation and content distribution, like in its simplest forms, like that's pretty much marketing, right? Like where you need to understand like the mathy side and operations, like as you mentioned, but then you also need to have like some creativity or be able to know how and when to mix that in. And I think that a lot of that comes from just investing enough time in your customers, and listening to your customers. So I think that's why I like platforms like LinkedIn, is because it actually checks a lot of boxes. Like you're able to do a lot of social listening. You're able to like understand your audience. You're able to get like real-time feedback, basically, like within 24 hours, like see if a concept, if there's something there. And basically, and for free, right? Like you can put something out there in the world, like kind of get it validated, and then you can put more money behind it. So, and you can do that with different social platforms as well. Like I know people that'll post on something small on Twitter, and then if that does well, then they'll post it on LinkedIn. If that does well, they'll make it a blog post, and like if that does well, like they'll make it an ad. And so there's a very like strategic way to do it. But I think yeah, going back to Chris Walker, since I've listened to a lot of his State of Nemanja podcast, I think just demonstrating that he has like had an e-commerce store, worked as a product manager, I think first, or like on the engineer side of it, then worked on like the brand side of it, and also was there during like the height of performance marketing in some ways, and got in on the ground floor of social advertising. So just forcing yourself to do all of those things, like not being satisfied with one element of marketing, and then knowing when and how to put it all together. Like he strikes me as like a type of person that doesn't I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but doesn't have like a dog in the fight, you know, like he doesn't care if like performance marketing wins or if brand marketing wins. He's just wants to test everything, and then whatever tests well and whatever works, like that's what he'll do. And then so I think like learning from people like that have done a little bit of everything and doing a little bit of everything myself, and you're seeing where those patterns are and seeing if other people are seeing those same things, has been the most successful. And so I think like that's why I talk about being in communities and listening to the market, talking to people, social media. I think when you put all of that together, that's kind of where the magic happens.
Nicely said. A nice overview of everything. I need to say that Chris Walker takes credits for me starting to simplify things more, because I was talking about those things that he's talking about even before, but I was considering it as something that's foundation, that's basic, that everybody understands. And this was one of the biggest mistakes that I made, because actually it is the foundation, but people didn't do it like that and didn't understand it like that. So when Chris said it in a way he said it, it's like a revolution. It sounds like a revolution that completely changed the mindset. And that's why it's kind of interesting. And like realizing that in July, I think, this is the moment where where like even my LinkedIn started to grow, like from 6,000 followers, I'm now approaching 18,000. So it's kind of like a crazy growth, and just because I dumbed down the way I'm saying things, just so like people can understand them. And also one of the things that you mentioned, and I don't talk about much these days when it comes to like the operations. I used to work for two years as director of operations, and before that I was a GM, and I was talking a lot about it. That's why I'm kind of like maybe bored to talk more about it. But I learned a lot, and I learned that some CEOs or the business owners don't usually take it for granted and not implement it as much. Like in the agency where I work, before I started Funky Marketing, like I was brought in as director of operations to help us scale and like improve the processes and everything. And I did it in the first month. But the CEO, the owner, it's the same person, never actually wanted to implement it. And like when I was leaving the last month, he told me, can you actually write the processes? But like I wrote them in the first month. I will just do the same, and they will be made as I see them. Like it doesn't matter. Just do them so we can have something. And and he basically told me that it's a good thing that I'm leaving just by doing that. And also like things that you mentioned, using Twitter, using Facebook, using different platforms to try out things. I mean, most of the things that I'm writing on LinkedIn are the posts in Serbian that I posted on Facebook like 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. I was just using it as a Twitter just to see if I can get people to react to something. And now when Facebook memories are reminding me, I just like translate it to English, maybe add a few things, and I post it on LinkedIn and it goes viral. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's a cool story. Yeah, to hear. I mean, that's a really good case study in repurposing, right? Like in repurposing content. And because you're basically talking about like some principles of operations, of like of being efficient, and then like the creative and like the creation process, and how it's not like a one and done thing. I'm blanking on his name right now. Simmons, I want to say. Richard, I don't know, but some guy on LinkedIn who's really big on this is basically like create once and distribute forever, right? Like the concept of like and because I have a hard time with this, because I like being original. Like I don't like the idea of just like posting the same thing and like boring my audience basically, right? And so I still kind of struggle with this, but I'm coming around to the concept of like iterations basically, right? Like it doesn't have to be the same thing, but iterations, so that you are meeting your audience where they are. And so it's channel dependent, right? Like Twitter is going to be different than LinkedIn. It's going to be different than Facebook. So listening to that, and then longer form content, thinking about what that could be. And I think it's essentially like a blog or a podcast. And I think, you know, some really smart people are doing like the video content, like, you know, like the video webinar / podcast, like that can be turned into a blog post, and it can be turned into these smaller things. And that's a good way to kind of just do all of them in one. But yeah, at my last job at the bank, for the last year, almost a year, I was reporting to the COO, like to the operations lead. And he had like a very like banking background, like very like operations focused background, and like thought in efficiencies. And that was really helpful for me because I could predict like what his feedback would be about something, right? And so it forced me to kind of build in that step sometimes of, you know, before going to your supervisor, going to your boss, like when you get like enough feedback from them, because I got different feedback from, you know, from different supervisors, you get to know like what they're looking for, right? And so so for instance, my boss before that, I would start trying to like be more critical about like my design, because I wasn't as strong in design, but I would kind of like know to make everything proportional, like, and make it look a certain way, you know? And so you kind of like learn that. And then with the COO, I started kind of like thinking inefficiencies too, of like, okay, what is my pitch for, you know, buying this product or this strategy, you know? Like I would think about business outcomes a little bit too, right? With both of my bosses, really, like my boss right before that was really good as well, and sort of challenged me to track things, like to track things where I could, and I think in like the SaaS world and startup world, like sometimes you can go too far on that as well. But I think like where possible, like you should try and track pretty much everything. That's kind of like my thought on it, but not like make all of your decisions based on that, and not assume that it's accurate too. And so yeah, so for one campaign, it was like an ad just in like newspapers, like it was very like traditional stuff that we were doing, but I had to like figure out a way to like track the efficiency of that campaign. And so it essentially involved me creating a training deck, like for the bankers, on how to input, you know, whether or not they had heard about this ad through the Houston Chronicle, and if they had, like to check that box essentially. But it was a matter of like sending that out a few times as reminders, and then also like calling them and seeing if they were having any issues with that, or if them and like the other bankers were able to track that. So yeah, so sometimes it's just kind of like getting scrappy. Like we didn't have a CRM or anything at that time. Like this was basically an Excel sheet, and then using like that one how'd you hear about us, like thing, you know, on our website, and then also when people came in. But then I was surprised that it like I you know, put time into the creative and things, and we were running a good deal. But it was still kind of like surprising when it worked, you know, like when you're able to track it. And then I was able to, you know, do some basic Excel in saying, okay, this is how much we're paying every month, like for this ad buy, and this is how many people signed up because of this, and these are which offices that they signed up in, and so this is where it's working, and then making decisions based off that, you know. So for instance, in this case, we were advertising in 2 different newspapers, and I ended up cutting one of them because while it was efficient, it wasn't as efficient as the other one. And so I was like, I'd rather like just run it in the other one. It's still hitting the same people. It's a larger publication. And so yeah, so just learning from that. That's like a very basic example of tracking things where you can, and even if there's not a built-in way to do it, like you can build the way to do it, because in that case it was just trainings and like reminders, and yeah, and just like basic Excel equations of like you know, what's my revenue and then what's my total profit too. So that was another cool thing that I learned, was just knowing to ask some of those things, right? Of, okay, well, this is how much in theory, you know, like this is how much like the revenue is, but you know, once you take out like your marketing spend, your advertising spend, and then you look at your actual margins that you're making like on that, because it's obviously not 100% profit. Like what's your actual profit? And so that's what I was looking at for campaigns, was like the profit too, based on our margins. And so so yeah, I think that exercise specifically, and then working with an operations minded person to teach me some of those things, because he started one of the best questions he asked me was, you know, if it was your money, what would you do? Like, what would you do with it? And so I think I tried to think about that anyways, working in two really small smaller operations, smaller businesses. You're kind of forced to think that way. Like they're not just handing out money like they might in a larger corporation. And so I think that's good. Like I think it's good to work in a smaller organization at some point in your career, because you start thinking as if it's your own money, or at least like having some scrutiny to what you're buying.
Yeah, you reminded me of something. I mean, that thing that you said, it's totally worth it. Like, what would you do if it's your own money? Like, that's how I'm kind of influencing people in funky marketing to think about clients, projects, and accounts. Like, look at it as if it's yours, and then suggest, optimize, add, work on it, do whatever, but look at it as if it's yours. Would you do that? Or, you know, those kind of things. And it reminded me of a campaign we used to run back then, while I was working in a different agency, like working in performance marketing. We worked with Curaprox. I don't know if you know about them. Like, it's, I guess, the biggest toothbrush producer in Europe. All kind of products connected to the dental care and, you know, those kind of things. And so we did a lead generation campaign, and we tried to identify people who are their users, then to differentiate them, and then to qualify them based on the products, you know. And it was kind of interesting because we managed to get, I think, 16,000 leads in like less than 2 months. It was like really crazy, because they have a brand and people know about them. So that kind of thing made it easier. But they have a specific product. So we needed to go deep and to think about the things that we will use to extract the information for people. So like, basically they have interdental toothbrushes, and we couldn't just ask people, do you have like space between your tooth, you know, those kind of things. So we said, okay, let's ask them if they're using the tooth sticks. You know, if they are, they probably need those toothbrushes, or, you know, those kind of things. And one thing we added at the end, it is to, like, what would you do if Curaprox doesn't exist starting tomorrow? You know, because it's a brand that people get attached to. They're using it every day. And we gave them the award, like first 3 award people will get some things. And just out of that question, we got ideas for content for the next year for social media. Like, because we can follow the path, and it's 16,000 people answering. We can follow the path, see some things that are unique, some things that really reflect what people feel about it. And it was kind of like a huge win. But I mean, what the client did with those leads, that's a different story. But from our side, it was really great. And it's how, like, simple, small question can actually change the whole narrative of the results you get and what you can do with them.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. And again, like it goes back to thinking creatively, in that when you got those responses, you weren't just thinking about like I don't know, like violating customer privacy, and like how can I like extract like this so I can sell people immediately. I mean, in this circumstance, you're an agency, and so you're just delivering the leads, but you're thinking about it as like qualitative data, and like how can I internalize this and use it for social media? Like how can I speak in the voice of the customer, basically? Like they're giving us like exactly like what they think about things, and so we can either, you know, use their own voice, like if they've given permission, like, or at least take the sentiment of it to like inform like our entire social strategy. So I think it's cool for that. And then yeah, just also from like a performance standpoint, that was a thing that I was kind of weak in, and that I just hadn't done. Like I said, I didn't have to do like the distribution part or like some of the performance marketing things. Like it was either taken care of by other agencies, or it just wasn't something that we did. So I'd been wanting to like learn more about those things, and I had taken courses and things as well. But I think that's also something that I've learned just from absorbing like from other marketers, is that it was brand focused, and then it went over to performance, and now it's kind of swinging back to brand. It's not that you don't need performance, but it is like a solid mix of the two. And I think what's interesting, I keep going back to Chris's story. I just think it's interesting. But what's interesting for him is that like he understands performance marketing and social media marketing, but he started his own brand like without paid ads, like with pure like brand, a pure brand play. And so I think like where possible, like if you can bootstrap, and if you can basically survive long enough to build a brand and to grow that way, that's the way to go. And so I think for most like solopreneurs and things, like it does make sense like to kind of like start building an audience now, or start testing things now, because that'll like pay off in the long run, because most people like don't have a year runway, you know, of like I'll make $0 for like a year, and then it'll work out, because I think that brand marketing works like if you have the time, and if you have like the patience to do it. And so that's sometimes like where people get frustrated, is because like they're like, well, I'm not seeing any leads from it, so we need to do something else. So that's often why there needs to be a balance, because unless your brand marketing is perfect too, like if it's like completely perfect and you can hold out for a certain amount of time, then like you can grow with that specifically. But if not, like you at least need a balance like of those things. And depending, you know, if you're in B2C or B2B, and like how transactional it is and how long the sales cycle is.
Cool. So I don't need to ask you what will you double down in the next year. You already said a lot of things, a lot of good advice.
No, I'll answer that as well.
Let's go into it.
That's a good question. So yeah, August 5th is when I was like, okay, I'm gonna post on LinkedIn every day. Whereas before that, I was doing it. I was posting, you know, maybe every other day, or I had worked up to kind of like every other day. I was posting a few times a week, but I wasn't committed to it. And I think if you're not committed to it, and you don't put yourself in a position to fail, then you don't, at least for me, like I don't give it my all, or I don't give it my best. Like, and so when I decided to commit to doing that, then I knew that I was basically saying like, I'm going to try, you know what I mean? Like I'm going to like really try. And so that if it doesn't work, like it's going to be crushing in some ways, because I will have felt like I have like actually tried. And if I wasn't doing it, then I could always say, well, I wasn't really trying, and that's why I didn't succeed. And so I think for me, like when I put myself in that position, then I'm going to work harder to create good content, or to put myself in a position to succeed, because I won't have anything to fall back on. you know? And so it's not like the stakes are high, because I had like a job at that time. I was freelancing. Like I didn't need, and I think this is another important point, like I didn't need it to work. I was like doing fine without it, but it's like, if it does work, then I'm able to use those insights to be better at the social media parts of my job. And then there's lots of things that I didn't consider, like when I was doing it. I really just wanted to learn the platform so that I could, help my clients, like help the business, help myself with my own like personal branding. But then I learned that another part of it, like the actual networking part of LinkedIn, is pretty great as well. So just finding some people that I thought were doing interesting work, and like reaching out to them and asking them about, their background and things that are working for them, and being willing to share anything that's working for me. So I think that openness of just being able to share, willing and able to share like what's working for you, and testing enough things that you have valuable information to share. I think that's a good way to go with social media. But I think it's ultimately just enough repetition. And so for me, like putting myself in a position where I'm basically making a promise to myself of like, I'm gonna do this every day for at least like the rest of the year. And then I actually do it, and I also don't want to put my name on something that I don't like, like, because it's ultimately like your name and your brand and stuff. And so I think having some sort of standards was big for me, and the standards were basically, I have a deadline, like I need to get this out before midnight every day. And then on the other hand, like having standards for quality. So like that was the part that was more natural for me, because I had been like writing content, and I felt like I knew what good content looked like, especially talking to marketers. Like you can just say to yourself, what would I like to consume? Like, would I engage in this post? Am I actually learning while I'm writing it? Like, am I able to clarify something or explain it in a way that I wasn't able to before? And so those are kind of some checks that I use. As far as for 2021, like, I mean, I'm planning to continue doing what I'm doing, and that's working, but probably also test some other mediums with that. So I'd done a little bit of video, a little bit like a few GIFs, like a few sliders and stuff, but images. So like mixing in some kind of like multimedia stuff in there, to test that. And on top of that, podcasts. I think we're gonna, for my job as well, we're going to be, I think doing more of that. So doing more video work and community type work. And I think that those are kind of two core places to start on brand. I think if you already have something going as far as like a system and performance marketing, where you're covering like the intent channels, which we are, having like Google ads and social media ads and some good sponsorships and stuff. I think working on that as well. I'm not in the paid ads side of things. Like we all collaborate, and I think that's a fun part of working at a startup. But basically our paid ads guy is great. And he's got some creative ideas, but even before that, I've seen that we buy, like my family, like me and my husband, like we buy from podcasts. Like sometimes, like it's funny to see like that brands that we've never heard of, and only heard of from podcast ads, work. And so I always pay attention to things that work on me, or things that get my attention. And so I'm a believer in that, actually, of like some sponsorships working well, both in newsletters and podcasts. I think is interesting, especially if you're building the brand still, right? Like if it's going to be a while, like if you're still building the runway for the brand side of things, then doing some of those sponsorships in mediums that your audience is kind of like a good stopgap solution. Or maybe it's something that you continue doing even after your podcast is up and working. yeah, those are things that I like, is LinkedIn, podcasts. For me personally, I think I need to start posting on Twitter as well. It's kind of like the same thing, where it's like I need to learn that platform a little bit better, because I'm comfortable with LinkedIn. I haven't done Twitter as much, and so I've only used it to like yell about Blazer games primarily, and follow other people. Like I'll learn marketing things from that, but I haven't used it for my own platform yet. And so, you know, learning that for our brand, for MarketerHire, and then also just, you know, for my own knowledge. I think you have to constantly be learning if you're a marketer.
Yeah, sounds good. So many things to unlock over there, and I think listening to you and to me, like we can go on for like 5 more hours and talk about all kind of different things, nerd it out. And but there's one thing that I'd like us to do. I'd like you to join me and Marty Sanchez on B2B Weekly in January, maybe February, so we can talk more about basketball related to the marketing and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
I know you are a NBA fan, as two of us are. So that can be, I think, a good match, and we can go and unlock a lot of things over there, especially that you are a Portland fan, and like Dame is doing a lot, not only related to the basketball, but also hip hop, about community, about all kind of different things over there. And this is the topics that Marty and I are just like tackling throughout the podcast, but never got really into it. And I think that would be a nice continuation of this conversation.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'm always up for doing that.
Yeah, so tell me and the audience, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best place. Just DM me or interact with my content, and I will try and respond. And yeah, I should mention that I'm also the managing editor at MarketerHire, and what we do is basically connect the best marketing freelancers with the best marketing teams. And yeah, so I'm essentially trying to create the best content for freelance marketers and for marketing teams. So
yeah, guys, I recommend you follow what Camille is doing. I like it a lot, and I think she often has a different perspective than the one I could imagine for some topics, and this is like the kind of edge that I like to see everywhere. And yeah, thanks for being here. Thank you for being my guest, and I hope we'll do it one more time and unlock even more things.
Yeah, my pleasure.